Hey skaters! Today I want to introduce you the Wowgo Mini2, the smallest e-skate in the market. Let's go in! Wowgo has a place in my heart, a special place, ever since I reviewed the first Wowgo Mini, one of my first reviews, and the first one of a small board. It was like a tank, it was indestructible, and it has an extremely reliability for the time in which that we were in the world of skateboarding. And the board lasted a long time and gave me a lot of joy, till I sold it. It also allowed surprising mobility, although with a board so small that it often made it dangerous. In this case, the Mini2 measures 74 cm and it's slightly longer than the Wowgo Mini 1, which make it a little more comfortable on your feet. The board ends just in the front of the front track and it has a little more tail. And since we are talking about the board, I will tell you that it has 8 layers of Canadian maple. Since it's a short board, it's stiffer. It has much more concave than the original one, which makes your feet stay more locked inside the board and allows you much more control when carving and turning. It also brings an interesting extra, a replaceable tail pack that avoids the board being damaged from scratches when braking during the manual and to protect it from rising and lowering the board by popping it. This feature will like to people who will remember that those old school years of skateboarding, and it also gives it a very cool touch. Using the tail to pop up the board is one of the advantages of the shorter boards, that you can lift them without having to bend down, which is always very practical, but it will wear out this area a lot. So in this sense, Wowgo keeps delivering on those small details that gives to the product a very interesting added value. Also, Wowgo has chosen to make a gripted with much more interesting design than what Wowgo Mini 1 had, but it hadn't the foam grip tip that it's now so hyped. The overall aesthetic feels much more refined and premium, a welcome upgrade once again, even if I'm not a fan of the glitter they use underneath. The wheels in this Mini 2 are still 90mm one, the same that the original Mini used, with a hardness of 78A and also with a curious fact. And that fact is that Wowgo in this case has chosen not to use any design for their motor sleeves, rather they added some stickers that you can put on the top of the wheel. This will make you able to choose your style. The issue with that is that soon they fall off very easily. It's good and interesting that brands try new things, even though in this first attempt I would say had been a bit of a failure, but I appreciate innovation. Moving on, while there's a little change in the wheels, the motors are certainly new. They are hobby wing of 680 watts each. The power has been increased significantly and the size of the motor has been reduced quite a bit, so improvements are all around. Plus, Wowgo added this metal cover that gives the board a pretty nice look. I really like the design they have used, and honestly they are continuing with the design line that they took with the Wowgo 3. That is to redesign all the skateboards line so that they look much more serious and much more professional. That was the only thing that they lacked a lot previously, as the Mini 1 was very simple with a very industrial design. There have been many people who have been surprised by the design, though it must also be said that the design sounds familiar to me. You know. The power of the motors can bring you to 38 km an hour. Be reminded that 38 km an hour with a Mini is a lot of speed, and it's dangerous since not having so much distance between your feet makes it much more unstable. And when we find the stones or pothole, we are going to notice much more, and it's going to be much easier to lose control of the board. The tracks of the Wowgo Mini 2 are 45-degree caliber tracks. It's curious because Wowgo has always pulled towards Paris axles and has even used original Paris tracks in some of their boards. In this case, they have opted for the caliber style. I don't know very well why, but personally I have always liked more Paris, but I think that if you are not very picky, the difference between is very slight. In terms of turning ability and stability, they seem like a very solid choice. The tracks being 45 degrees mean they sacrifice turning for top speed stability, a very wise choice for a mini board. something that also reduces the possibility of a wheel bite. With the board being able to use cloud with donuts, this becomes even more of a possibility, so you need to be very careful when setting up the bushings and the risers. In this case, the bushings are medium hardness barrels, specifically 84A. I have to say that the default bushings are quite decent, and I've not felt the need to change them, so that reduces the tinkering you have to do with a new product. The Mini 2 has a unique enclosure, integrating the ESC and the battery, very similar to the one in the defunct boosted Mini. As you can see, we have a charging port up there. The power button, that you will use very little, has some LEDs that shows you the charging of the board. I will tell you that the enclosure is quite easy and quick to change. The battery is 10S2P of 5.2 amps and 180 watts hour. It runs at 36 volts nominal, and the cells are 18650. One of the things that has been improved on this board is that Wowgo has moved past to the old standard of the 4 amp battery, thus giving a slight more range. Wowgo says that you can do 25 kilometers. I reached it up to 18 to 20 kilometers more or less, though I will not recommend doing very long routes of so many kilometers with the Mini 2, since you will end up with very tired feet. Now we are going to talk about the brain of the Mini 2, which is none other than the Hobbywing 4.0 version Mini. The controller is not the typical Hobbywing. As you can see, the design is a little different. It's somewhere between the X-Wing and the standard one. It's smaller and fits better in the hand, allowing us to have a closed fist, and the truth is that the scroll wheel is personally much finer and it sticks less when you have to be with the skate for a long time. What benefits does this control give us? Well, look, the first and most interesting thing is that we have no longer to bend down to turn on the board. It works by pressing the power button. The board turns on automatically and we would be ready to use. This is one of the things that I like the most about the new Hobbywing ESC, a feature that is strangely the 2S Max that we have back there and the 3X don't have, but I find more and more necessary every day. It's true that being in suspension, the board will slightly consume energy, but the comfort that this gives you is incredible. Speaking about the ESC, electronic speed controller, basically what most of you already know is that if you push the wheel forward, the board will roll forward. If we pull backwards, it will brake. It has a single button that if we press it once, it changes the mode, having a total of 4 modes. The first reaches 20 km/h, the second mode reaches 32, mode 3 that reaches 39, and turbo mode that allows you to run at 40 km/h, but with more acceleration and braking, which is very interesting. Specifically, if we are in a city and we have to dodge cars, pedestrians, or slam the brakes because someone gets into the bike lane by surprise. But remember that this mode will wear out the motors more. Also, if we press the button twice, it allows us to change the direction of the motors. It's a feature that you may never use, but it's a nice to have. As always, we also find a counter of how many kilometers we have traveled on our current trip, a general odometer that marks the total of kilometers that we have skated with our board, and a general odometer that marks the total kilometers that we have skated with our board. To sum up, at a design level, this board seems very pretty to me. Yes, it's true that it looks a lot like the boosted Mini, but boosted died and Wowgo is here. Also, there is just enough space to add a shred light under the front track, in such a way that they become super tight fitted and don't fall off, making them super fixed. The Wowgo Mini 2 cost $550, while the X-Wing Wave costs $750, with which we are talking about $200 difference. In euros, we find that the Mini 2 without discounts costs 487 euros with the current exchange. It's also true that the brands are constantly making promotions, and surely if you use code, it will surely be cheaper for you. For example, the one from Daniel Kwan, who is injured and can't make the reviews as he used, so here I will leave his code and surely you can save a few dollars on this board. Speaking more generally, yes, the market for minis is quite limited. There isn't many brands that offer showboard. In this case, we have the Wowgo Mini 2, the X-Wing Wave, which is much more expensive, although it's true that it has a very complete mobile application, but in terms of features, it's not very different from this. You also have the Tomahawk Wine, which is much more for a casual riding, since it's a 30-volt board, not 42, with which in terms of speed and autonomy, it's much more limited. We have also the Evolve Stoke, though that is a very expensive board with so much power that the battery is decimated and it's very heavy. We also have the Backfire Mini, which is the lightest Mini I ever tried, but I burned 4 motors and I abandoned it. and the MINI2, which is a great option too. With that, the Wowgo Mini2 is at a point in terms of price and performance that is one of the most interesting options right now on the market. With their improved design, they compare much favorably against MIPO and Backfair than they did it in the past, especially now that there are many more skate brands and people have so many options that the brands have to give something different. And in this case, they are creating a very sweet spot between price and aesthetics. We are going to talk about negative points. In this case, one drawback I see is the use of hub motors as opposed to belt-driven ones, like the 3X. They have their advantages like reduced weight but lacking comfort. The other point is that it's still 36 volts. Currently the company is making the jump to 50.4 volts, which in the same amperage you get more performance and more efficiency. It's true that the cells are much larger, but it makes the whole board much more functional, much more efficient, and give us much higher top speed. But in this case, I understand that they stick it to the 36 volts. For a Mini, it's more than enough. Here we are at the end of my review of the Wowgo Mini2, a great board. Remember, if you have any question, any comment, you can write it down below. Remember to like or dislike so I will know if you like the content, and remember to subscribe with the bell if you want to receive notifications when I release a video. And I will leave you here the discount code of Daniel Kwan, and see you in the next video.